Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB, bringing you InBetweenIsode number 35, and so this InBetweenIsode is going to be a little bit different and a little bit longer. So what I'm going to try to do in this InBetweenIsode, and the tea is Essence of Tea's 2014 Guafengzhai. So if you haven't ogled at Essence of Tea's catalog yet, they tend to be a premium vendor. This is one of the most premium of their young teas. It sells for something like, it's in Great British pounds, so I have to convert it, but I think it's something like $1.47 per gram, so it's not a cheap tea at all. And David, one of the owners over there at Essence of Tea, was kind enough to send me 20 grams to try. So big thanks to David. I really appreciate this opportunity to try. And so why is this episode going to be longer? The main reason being is that pu'erh can be a very dynamic sort of tea. Some teas will drop off at like the 6th or 7th steep if it's like a plantation type tea, or it could just be very dynamic in terms of changing. A lot can depend on how you brew it, how much leaf you're using, how long you're going for. So there's a lot of different parameters, and one thing we really don't get to explore a lot in TeaDB is just the full extent of what a session will be like. So with Danny, I'll usually do the first couple steeps. Sometimes in these in-between episodes, I'll do the third or fourth, which I kind of think of as the money steeps. But very, very rarely will we do more than 3 or 4 maximum. So I really want to try in this chance to explore this. There's a chance that it's just going to be flat out boring just to watch this guy drink this expensive tea that you can't try, or you haven't tried, or you can't afford to try and do it. But we will see how it goes, and let me know, guys, how you guys like it. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not in my pajama pants, so a special tea gets special attire, or more likely average attire for most of you. So I have already heated the water, so I'm just going to give this, preheat the vessel. You could probably, if you wanted to be real, didn't want to waste anything at all, you could just drink the rinse. But I'm going to rinse it once, and I'm going to try to get to at least 8 steeps here. So one fun fact for you guys that you may or may not have realized is that the camera that we have turns off at about 12 minutes. So a couple episodes will just like randomly cut to like the stock footage that we have of like the pouring of the gaiwans and stuff like that. So I'm trying to time this episode in a way that I can either hit pause and go from like steep 4 or 5 to the completion, or just go really, really quickly. But I think that's probably unlikely. So this will be a rinse here, and then we will have a smell. So it's got a nice aroma. The reputation of these sort of eastern Mengla County teas is to be sort of like darker and bassier, and I can smell some sort of like fruit notes, dark fruit notes coming into it. Yeah, so that is the rinse, and so similar. So let us get to the actual steepings. It also has a very sweet aroma, I should say. Sort of like dark cherries, cherry-ish is kind of how I would describe it off the cuff. I'll do one more while we wait for that to cool. And so one thing I will say that is nice about Essence of Tea is they do sell tea by the gram. So, I mean, it's not everyone can afford a 357-gram cake of this, which I think would come in at around $500, which is a lot of money to spend on tea, frankly. But a lot of people could spend $10 on a 5-gram session, or $7 or $8, depending on how the cost breaks down. So I am quite excited to try this. And so, cheers, guys. So the body is good. I would say it's not quite as thick as Paul's Last Thoughts, but that's kind of like saying it's not as thick as motor oil. This is a very thick tea compared to a lot of other teas that you're going to run into. So a lot of sweetness, a lot of the strength in these premium teas is following how it goes down your throat and how it reacts to your body. Do you feel it come down your throat into your chest? And the answer is, yeah, you can definitely feel some of that throatiness coming into it. So far the tea hasn't been, and a lot of this is just how I'm steeping it, it hasn't been especially bitter or astringent, but it has been very thick in a very pleasant sort of way. And we'll let that cool for a hot second. So I don't exit this in-between-isode with just like a tongue that's just scalded and red all over the place. Yeah, so inevitably people will ask me, and this is my third time sessioning the tea, and I have enough for just one last session. It will ask me, is the tea good? Which is kind of like asking if the ocean's blue. Of course it's good. This is a really good tea, and it's really, really tasty. It hits a lot of attributes, and I think I've exchanged emails with another person, a big fan of Essence of Tea. Essence of Tea does seem to have a lot of very big fans, people that love them. And one thing that I think we had both agreed on is that this is just sort of like a great tea to convert Qi non-believers. The energy that comes off of this tea is really, really noticeable, I would say. So if you are someone that you're like a grumpy old man, I don't get Qi, and people are talking about that, well, this is a good tea, I would say, for you to try. And try to go in there with an open mind and just see how it makes you feel. So sort of like a dark forest combination of like cherries and a little bit of pine is what I would say. And I'm going to heat this up again for the third steep. Again, a good strong feeling of tea going down your throat. So a little bit of hay is coming into the aroma right around now. So now is usually when you can start to have a little bit more flexibility on how you steep this. And of course you always have that flexibility, but you can try to extend it. And you could, if you extend it too much, you're going to end up with a lot of astringency. Just generally speaking, not specifically about this tea. Yeah, so those hay notes are hay grain, a little bit of tanginess, and the aroma are starting to come out a lot, and that's something I've experienced a lot this in May with a lot of the teas, a lot of the tea urchin teas, a couple of the Yunnan sourcing ones, is a sort of like generic hay grain upfrontness, and I've noticed that a lot in, like, I don't know, Manjuan and Shikong, and I wouldn't put too much weight into these regions, but you can sort of decipher similar tastes in a lot of these teas. So an astringency has sort of creeped into the tea, and so that would hesitate for me to sort of extend these steep times. Sometimes this astringency will come in for the middle steeps, and then it will disappear by the time you get to like steep 8 or 9, something like that. But that does not make me want to steep it for something like 30 seconds. So good deep taste. I would say the body is starting to thin out a little bit, and so you're kind of in this battle between like wanting to extend that steep time just to enhance the body, but you don't want to face a super insurmountable astringency. More generic vegetal hay grain type aromas coming into the tea. So hoping to get to 8 steeps without burning my tongue. So that's kind of a lofty goal thinking about this. I've never actually timed how long I actually wait in between steeps or anything like that. It's sort of like a very natural flow. But under the restrictions of the camera, I'm forced to sort of pay attention to these things. So, if you guys noticed on the 4th steep, and you may not have, is that I extended that steep time by just a little bit, and so it's translated to a little bit of astringency. The body is definitely enhanced. If you follow the tea, you can definitely feel it a little bit more depth of body. But it's really, I think, the most noticeable part that it's added is it's increased that sort of like tangy. It's not unpleasant, but that sort of tangy, bordering on sour note to the tea. So that would lead me to believe that you really don't want to extend it more, because if you push that sour note too far, you're just going to get a really unpleasant brew. And right now, it's sort of at that cusp, and I think that's kind of how I brewed it. If I had gone for half the time, I probably wouldn't be tasting these same sorts of things. But still a lot of that sort of like sweet fruit / hay right now, so it's sort of a mix of those first 2 steeps. And I'm starting to feel very alert. A little bit longer, and it's probably good. A little bit of leather, I feel like, is creeping into this, and that's something that does creep into these teas. I guess it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of a texture thing. Not totally, but I can smell some of that there. Still a lot of sweetness, and I don't want to underemphasize that because I haven't talked about that so much. Still a lot of sweetness to this tea. So the sweetness really allows it to sort of develop these interesting things, interesting characteristics in a very pleasant way. So I'd say it's a very friendly tea. Maybe not friendly to the wallet, but friendly to the palate for sure. So this tea is kind of nice in the sense that it smells and tastes very similar. So a lot of those notes that I was describing in the aroma, I'm definitely tasting now. Then go ahead and go again. So some of those leathery notes are coming in. The tanginess is gone. It's been replaced by, I think the danger right now of steeping too far is sort of like that astringency, which is a little bit more prevalent in this past tea. Still some of those hay and grainy notes to it. So I guess inevitably, the question that you're going to run into, rather than is it good, is it worth it for me? And that's a very specific answer that I think varies a lot person to person for this thing. For teas like this that tend to be very expensive, and it's also an answer that will vary a lot depending on what you mean. If you're talking about is it worth it to buy a $500 cake, that's a very different level of commitment than saying, is it worth it for me to order 10 grams for me to have and share and maybe split with a couple of friends and have a couple special sessions with it. I don't know, and I think I will say that it's a very good tea, like the Last Thoughts, and the Last Thoughts is a tea that I'm hoping to bring on next episode in a similar sort of format, and so it'll kind of hopefully represent a nice little compare and contrast there. But I am going to continue drinking. So definitely some of that astringency there. Interestingly, it's sort of that sour note that I said I thought was gone is not gone at all. It's sort of like still has that sort of hay sourness to it. I should say tanginess. A little bit of leathery stuff in the finish. Texturally, the tea is big and soft, and it's been sort of like that consistency for this whole session. As far as like just noticing how my mouth feels and stuff like that, I have a strong salivation effect right now. After I finish this 8th steep and get off the camera, I will probably drink a full glass of water. And this tea will probably easily steep out for 20 times. You could sort of give it the extended steep treatment. You could give it a break and come back to it to sort of reinvigorate the leaves. But yeah, it's definitely a tea that you don't want to just steep 5 times and then forget about it. It's definitely a very good tea. And like you can see, pay attentive to the details. Like the first steep and the 6th steep are nothing at all alike. And the parameters that I'm using, you could use totally different parameters and get something just as good, but very different potentially. Excuse me. There's really good depth to the aroma. Yeah, the aroma is very inviting. And that might be one area where I think this might beat the last thoughts, although it's kind of hard to say without comparing them side by side. So, a lot of just the complexity combined together. Some of that sweetness combined with the astringency and the leathery notes. Less of that hay grain, sort of sour savoriness in this tea. I would say overall this is not the thickest tea, but it does have a very solid body. The body does fall off a little bit after the first couple steeps, but it's still medium to big as far as that would go, or how I would describe it for this session at least. And yeah, we will do one last one. And this tea is going plenty strong, so I can pretty much guarantee you that I will not be stopping at steep 8 for myself. I will continue to drink this tea. So even in the most complete in-between-isode as far as exploring a tea all the way, we'll not be exploring it all the way. And yeah, definitely let me know how you guys like this episode. Is this episode Lord of the Rings in the sense that it's good and long, or is it The Hobbit where it's just long and way too diligent and just very unexciting? So let me know in the comments below on TeaDB.org or in the YouTube section. I won't be butthurt if you didn't like it. And so for people that don't like those bitter or astringent, tangy, soury notes, I should mention that I'm really pushing this tea sort of on that sort of edge where I'm getting a lot out of it, but you're also pushing it and getting a little bit of those notes. I wouldn't say that it's ever become unpleasant because of that, but I will say that I have brewed it, at least for this session, with a bit of a heavy hand. You could definitely flash brew it longer, and you're going to lose out a little bit on body and hui gan and stuff like that, but you will definitely reduce some of those characteristics that you might not want to taste in your tea. Alright, last cup, guys. Cheers. So, sort of like this heavy leathery minerals in the finish. Definitely on the basier side in the last couple steeps, just in terms of like darker flavors, darker fruits, dark leather, that kind of thing. Dark leather thing. I'm not really sure, but I am filling the tea at this point, so I think it's probably good to call it quits. Thank you guys for watching this especially long in-between-isode, number 35, and come back next week and check out the last thoughts.